This is Jeff Wickwire, heard daily on Bible School Radio 91.3, KDKR, Decatur, Dallas-Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC, Commerce.
Portions of KDKR's daily programming do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, what does it mean to know your numbers? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it, and I do have a line open if you'd like to call in and ask a question and or make a comment. The number is 1-877-913-5357, 1-877-913-5357. You can also go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Send a question to the Ask Bob section, and I will get that answered for you. That's all. Another way to get information, all at the website, prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357 is the number to call, and I do have a line open. Well, let's start off with the stock market. Talk a little bit about what the next couple of weeks are going to bring to the table, and maybe give us an idea of what the next 2 or 3 months are going to look like. It just seems like the market is looking for something positive, absolutely just something to go up on, but yet it just can't find any positive news. Today marked the beginning of, maybe it was last week a little bit too, but significant earnings reports. That's when companies come out, release their earnings, and give guidance. Basically, it's a report card that says, hey, we're doing great, just like you thought. Analysts will post some numbers that they think that the company should be at. And if they miss those numbers, and there's several metrics they look at, but if they miss those numbers, then that is a signal most of the time to Wall Street that this stock is trading way too high and needs to go down. And that's what happened to a very big stock, a market-moving stock, so we thought anyway. I'll tell you what I mean by that in a minute, which was Goldman Sachs. I believe I'm right on this, but you'll get the idea. They missed earnings for the first time in 10 years or the biggest gap in 10 years, something like that. But the bottom line was it was not a very, very good report at all. But the only index that it really affected was the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which was down 391 points. The S&P 500 was down 8 points. And then the NASDAQ pulled out a gain, just barely, and they were up 0.14%. Not much at all, but at least not a loser. Generally speaking, when you see a big stock like a Goldman Sachs come out and announce some not so good news, the entire market will fall. Not so much today. So things are kind of disjointed as far as how the market is reacting to news. So really not much to point to say, I think this is what we're going to see here for the next couple of weeks. We really haven't seen a very strong trend as of yet develop and get the market where it needs to go. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next coming days and keep you posted on what you need to know. 1-877-913-5357. One of the things I wanted to do today was talk about some of the questions and give some of the answers to some of the questions that I'm receiving most often through Ask Bob, through meetings, you name it. I feel like that if I'm hearing a question more than once, several times, then there's a lot of you that are asking this same question. There probably is not a question that I get asked more about than Social Security. And it's usually just two questions. When do I take Social Security? Should I take it now or later? And there's a couple of things to note about Social Security. The first one is it can be extremely complicated and confusing because basically what I have found to be Social Security law is a rule, a stated rule, and then about 4 pages of different scenarios where that may or may not apply. They give all the detail, but it is it's just so incredibly confusing. And then I think it's confusing to the point that you can't necessarily call the Social Security office and not get more than two different answers. So there is a very complicated aspect of Social Security. But for most of us who don't fit into the various scenarios where something could be this way or that way, depending on what's happening here or what's happening there, when you are pretty general cut and dry, then there's only about 4 things you really need to know. And I want to say this too, is that none of this is a cookie cutter answer to this question, suggesting that this one cookie cutter answer fits everyone. I call that the textbook answer. And this is, without question, depends upon your own unique situation. For some people that I've talked to, it makes sense to take it at 62. For some people I've talked to, it makes sense to take it to 67 or 66, depending on what full retirement age is for you. And there's some people that I think, in fact, a couple comes to mind right now, that it totally makes sense to take it and wait till age 70, because there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to a financial plan. Now, a financial plan, without question, should answer whether or not you should be taking Social Security and what age, because those scenarios have been run in a financial plan, unless it's changed, would give you an automatic answer, because that's based on your own specific situation. Realistically, not everyone has a financial plan, so here's just some things to consider. The first one is the answer is not, and when I say the answer is not, the answer to when do I take Social Security, should I take it now or later, is not about beating the odds. That's the first thing that so many people will do, the largest percentage, I believe, is that they will get a calculator out and multiply it at age 67, if they took it at 67, 68, 69, 70, and they start to get the age to where they beat the odds, and they get to the point where they've made more by taking it at a certain age than they did if they would have done another age or waited or whatever. I would suggest to you that trying to beat the odds is not the way that you want to go, unless you have way more money than you know what to do with, ever could spend, and Social Security is not a factor. I mean, if Social Security is a factor in your financial plan, for most people I believe it is, it's not that you could just go, I don't need it, and not take it. You definitely don't want to base it on the odds, because there's so many moving parts, a number of variables that could occur. Just kind of make this a shaky decision point. And so I would be careful with that, because you just never know what will happen. Make it not about beating the odds, but once again, in your unique situation. The next thing that I would consider is that the death benefit can matter. What most people don't understand is what happens with Social Security when a spouse dies. Because the bottom line question is, what kind of financial shape will your spouse be in if you do pass away? Now, two things happen when in retirement and one of the spouses dies, leaving the other surviving spouse there to tend with money and everything else. The first thing that happens is you went from 2 Social Security checks down to 1. Then the second thing that happens is that you keep the Social Security check that's the highest. So if spouse A, and I use this in a blog that I wrote today, I refer to it as spouse A, spouse B, because, I mean, you could put the husband or you could put the wife there, but it's not always the husband that has the highest amount. It could be the wife that has the highest amount. Depends on, once again, the situation. But let's say spouse A receives $3,000 a month and spouse B receives $2,000 a month. Spouse A dies and spouse B loses his or her Social Security check and starts receiving the $3,000 a month payment. So simply put, the longer you wait, the bigger that death benefit can get. And so that's definitely something you want to pay attention to and see if it fits. And you know, really just comes down to the amount of money that you're receiving and what you have to live off of. But once again, the surviving spouse will keep the higher of the 2 checks, leaving one to go away and one to stick around. 1-877-913-5357. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, PastorChuck.org. At PastorChuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at PastorChuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, PastorChuck.org.
Hi, I'm Jan Markell, host of Understanding the Times. We're very excited to be a part of Bible School Radio. I hope you will join me Saturday, 10 a.m., for cutting-edge guests and the latest information to help you discern the truth, even the inconvenient truth. We'll help you understand our times and contend for the faith. That's Understanding the Times, Saturday at 10 a.m., right here on Bible School Radio or anytime at olivetreeviews.org.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson with the Point of View Radio Talk Show. I want to invite you to listen to our program on KDKR from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m. Monday through Friday. We look at various issues from a biblical perspective. Our topics range from politics and economics to the Bible, theology, and apologetics. We also bring authors and informed experts to the program. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. Hope you'll join us every day on Point of View right here on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show, 1-877-913-5357. Do have a line open. Would love to hear from you today, whatever is on your mind. Once again, 1-877-913-5357. Would love to hear from you today, whatever's on your mind. You can also go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com and send a question in, and we'll get you answered that way as well. There's a lot of ways to to get information all at the website, prudentmoney.com. A couple more things to consider when determining when to take Social Security. The next one, actually the third one, which I think is the best reason to wait as long as you can. For every year that you put off taking that Social Security payment, you're gaining 8%, an 8% return. So I bet if it goes up by 8% every year. Now, if you do that between 66, which is 66 in 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, whenever your full retirement date is, and you wait till age 70, that could be a significant increase. So you want to keep that in mind as you decide whether or not to take it. Finally, I didn't actually put this into the piece that I wrote today for freedommoney.com, but the question is, will it be around? And I have through so many years of working with people, talked to people that would say, I just don't believe that Social Security is going to be around, and I want to take it so I can get my money out of it. Granted, I will give you that no one really knows what the future of Social Security looks like. I would also suggest that for most generations, minus the younger generations, I just don't believe that Social Security is really going to change. Now, of course, you can talk about the trust fund runs out of money in 2032 or 2034. All that means is the money there that was there to supplement the money coming in from payroll taxes to pay the full benefit, it will be gone, and it'll just be money in the system, into the Social Security system, and to the recipients from payroll taxes. That's only going to cover 70% of the benefit. So if they do nothing, the benefit will go down, I think, to about 75%, something like that, roughly 2034. To patch up that hole would literally take a very small rise in payroll taxes. So I don't think it's going to take that much. Now, having said that, do you want to be the president that on his or her watch the Social Security system fell into a problem? So at some point, and then of course the answer is no. At some point, you're going to have some politicians step up. They're going to raise taxes. You'll never know it, but you're going to feel it. They'll call it something else. And they'll put a big Band-Aid on the system, kick the can down the road until it gets to the point, maybe, 50, 75, 100 years from now, until the point that it's a real major league problem and can't be fixed. For the rest of us, I think we're going to be okay, and not a reason to not take Social Security. This is actually not a question that I received personally. I saw this on a subscription to a market analysis site that I follow. And I thought it was really interesting. I didn't read the answer because I wanted to answer it myself and answer it on the radio. The question starts out, it feels like we have way too much to lose. And it says, we had $550,000 invested and told our advisor we wanted a conservative approach. Since then, we've lost $88,000. Should we fire him? Now, I find this really interesting on several levels. Of course, being an advisor, I can see it from the advisor standpoint. I can see it from the client standpoint. The first thing that jumps out at me is if someone came to me and said, Bob, I want a conservative approach when it comes to investing my money. I would say, and if I said great, that assumption would be that we were both on the same page as far as conservative. And I will promise you this, that there is almost, a low probability, or it is a low probability, let me say it that way, that we are going to see the same definition for conservative. Most people think of conservative as one of 3 or 4 ways. Advisors think of it as some other way. So that tells the advisor nothing. Unfortunately, that's where advisors should start asking questions, because determining a risk level is much more about questions and answers, and it's more of an art than it is a science. Although many people want you to believe that it is a science, and it's just real easy to figure out. But if you are invested in stocks, then, and I don't have any way of knowing what this individual invested in, you should be able to, $88,000 loss is 16% loss. Most people lost 20 to 25%. So what that tells me is that the advisor was not being real conservative, more maybe of a moderate type of investment plan. But if you are in stocks, you should be able to lose up to 20% without, if you're not running a strategy, which is a whole other topic. But if you're in a buy and hold, you should be able to stomach up to a 20%. Anything over 20% is somewhat of a troublesome situation for the particular market. Now, they could have a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds. The problem is, and this is the very big problem for advisors, is that stocks and bonds have both been big losers. I've said this many times here in the last year. Bonds have took a historic loss last year, and if you had a mixture of bonds and stocks, which in the past has been very conservative in nature, it's yielded very big losses that most people who invest in bonds would not expect to have. So that's what you got to keep in mind, is that they could have the traditional 60% stocks, 40% bonds, and still taking a big loss. So it doesn't sound like it was invested at a low risk level. So the bottom line is that once you've discussed that with the advisor should say, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do going forward. If they are just going to stay invested, not do anything, that's where I would get concerned. I think that everybody that manages money should have a strategy. That's my bias. But you should, going forward, you should solidify a new risk level, determine what that looks like, determine what that means, look at it from the standpoint of definition and what you will tolerate, what you will not tolerate. All that said, I think it's important also, and this is not because I am one, but because I think that it's in your best interest to give the advisor the benefit of the doubt. And that means give the advisor an opportunity to tell you what they're going to do, why things are going to be different, and check in at 3 months, which is a quarter, then check in at 6 months, which is a quarter. If things have not changed or they're not trending in the right way or the right direction, then maybe you do look around and do something different. But you got to give your advisor the opportunity to correct and go a different route. Some will, very few will, most won't. I'm not a big advocate of the buy and hold strategy, especially in markets like we're in right now, and not suggesting that your advisor, who you may have invested a lot of time with, is able to set on a new course and start to recover from this. But benefit of the doubt, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to jump from one advisor, go to another advisor, then a year later that advisor doesn't come through for you. The problem is really corrected at the level of communication and how effective you are communicating with your advisor. Having said that, that's one of the most important things that between you and an advisor is the way that you communicate, and to make sure that you're definitely both on the same side when it comes to risk. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.